Hey Fae folk, welcome back. So for today's video, as you would have seen by the title, we're going to be taking a look at my personal bottom 10 Monster High lines. So I did do was it last week? I'm so bad at the timing, I can never remember when I posted videos, but I did recently do a video where I looked at Monster High across all of the generations and I picked my top 10 favorite lines that they'd ever come out with. And now we're doing the inverse of that because I kind of feel like I have to, right? Like if I do the top 10, I have to do the bottom 10. So we are looking at all generations today. And I'm going to be talking to you about the dolls that I just personally think, or the lines that I just personally think did not hit quite as hard. Now, the one thing is, with this video, I do have a few more restrictions, I guess you would say, that I've put in place just to make it more fair, because I do feel like some of the worst Monster High dolls were so bad that it's very predictable and very easy to just be like, oh yeah, the budget swim line was the worst one ever. And that's true. Ultimately speaking, I do think that if I don't put any restrictions on it, that one G2 budget swim line where it was fully molded on one pieces, no articulation, that was the worst one for me. But that's so easy to say. And that's kind of boring to say, right? So I did come up with a few rules just to make this, I guess, more of an interesting list, just because I do feel like there are so many that are so obviously bad that it's yes, but it's not fun, right? That's not entertaining. So the rules that I came up with are no super, super duper budget lines. So that swim line that I'm referencing, that is obviously a very, very heavily budget line. And it just kind of inherently is less exciting to me. I do think that there is a bit of an unfairness when you're comparing a line that has a much higher budget to one that doesn't. So I didn't include any of those. Specifically, I was saying any lines that have almost no articulation or it's all molded on. I think those are very, very budget. So I didn't want to include those. Ones that have elbow articulation but no knee articulation, for example, those are fair game because there's still something in there. But just the most budget of budget lines, I decided I wasn't going to be including. The second rule that I came up with was that the lines that I feature have to have at least 4 dolls. I feel especially towards the end of G2 of Monster High, they did a lot of lines that were almost mini lines where there are only 2 or 3 dolls, and most of the time I didn't like those, but I also just didn't feel like counting a line that has 2 bad dolls because that's the entire line. Again, I didn't feel like that would be as entertaining, so I didn't want to do that. And then my last rule was that no more than 1/2 of this list could come from G2. I feel so bad even saying that, but I try to make the distinction whenever I talk about it that there was some good that came out of G2 of Monster High. There were some dolls that I genuinely think were nice dolls, but also I do feel like most people hold the opinion that G2 was kind of the worst Monster High line, and for good reason. A lot of it was just clearly not being given as much budget or as much attention. So I didn't want to make this just a shitting on G2 video, essentially. So that was my rule, that out of my bottom 10, I couldn't have more than 5 be from G2, just to try to keep it fair and try to look at the things that I didn't like in every generation instead of just being look at how ugly they are. I don't know. I wanted this to be constructive and a little bit more interesting. So those are the parameters that we are operating with today. That was a long intro. I'm really sorry. I just did feel kind of like I needed to say all that. But yeah, that is going to be what we're working with. As per usual, all of the things that I say are just going to be my opinions. You're free to disagree. Just please do be kind if you do. But without further ado, let's actually start looking at these lines. So obviously, like always, we are going to be starting out at number 10, which is the least awful line we're going to be talking about today, and working our way up to number 1. So coming in at number 10 for me personally from Gen 1 is the dance class line. Now, this one kind of barely made it onto the list, and definitely would not have been on the list if I didn't put so many rules in place for myself. I don't think that it's a horrible line. Specifically, I actually do like the Rochelle from this line. I think that she has a really, really cute design. I think the Operetta and the Rebecca are totally fine. Even the Laguna is inoffensive to me. However, none of these dolls excite me. None of them really stand out in a good way to me, except maybe Rochelle. But even that, I'm it is just one of those lines where the dolls have a fairly simplistic design. There's not tons of layers and pieces and all that jazz, which is fine. Those lines do serve a purpose. But for me, it's just a little bit less exciting. And so this one was one that I saw and was just I don't think it was their best work. It is at number 10 because I definitely don't think it's their worst work, not by a long shot. But I do think that Monster High maybe could have made some designs that were a bit more inspired. I think especially the Howleen from this line and then the Gil from this line are just kind of I could have used some more, right? So not terrible, but again, with the parameters that I gave myself, bad enough to just barely make it onto the list. Then coming in at ninth place, we have a G3 line, and that is the Creepover line. I say all the time on this channel, but like I have to explain it just in case some of y'all are seeing this for the first time. I don't really do slumber party lines. I just don't get it. Like it's fine. Obviously, if you enjoy it, that is super duper for you. But for me personally, I tend to like my dolls in like fantasy clothes or really fun everyday clothes or like extravagant stuff. I don't really love slumber party lines just as a whole rule. So I feel like it's not that surprising that one made it onto the list here. I think the reason that Creepover specifically made it onto the list, whereas some other sleep lines like from Gen 1, like the Dead Tired line, did not make it onto the list, is just because I do think that it's a little bit boring. Out of the entire line, the only piece that I really like excluding the base dolls, because like the base dolls are pretty cute, the only piece that I really like is Draculaura's pants. Whereas with stuff like Dead Tired, even though I wouldn't own those dolls myself, I can look at it objectively and be like, there is a certain charm there. Whereas, I don't know, Creepover was a little bit earlier in G3's run, and I don't think that it's a terrible line. Again, it's not like, ew, these dolls are the worst dolls I've ever seen, I'm going to throw up. It's not like that. It's just, I do think they're not really exciting to me. Even for a pajama line, I feel like they are not as fun as others. Even like looking at other lines, like the Brat Slumber Party line that just got like reproduced recently. I won't buy them because I don't do slumber party dolls, but I think they're cute. Like I feel like they have interesting designs and stuff. Whereas I just feel like the Creepover line was just a little too boring, especially for a brand like Monster High who has such strong theming and everything. I feel like they could have done more. So again, not horrific, but just really not exciting to me whatsoever. Coming in at eighth place, we are bumping back to Gen 1, and I want to talk about these Skulltimate Roller Maze dolls. So again, we're towards the bottom of the list. I don't think that these are horrible, but we are getting into the dolls that I kind of actively dislike, just because I feel like these could have been so much more. I do understand that they went along with a movie, so like all the dolls' designs correlate to what they wore in the movie. But that doesn't really change the fact that I don't think that they're super impressive. And I think this bothers me more because y'all who have watched me for a while will know that sometimes when I like things, I'm more critical of them because I enjoy them. I like roller skating, haven't gone in a while, but like I like roller skating, and I do feel like there are a lot of interesting aesthetics that you can explore with roller skating, a lot of fun stuff that you can do. And so for me, this line just feels honestly quite lackluster. Like there's just nothing here that I feel is super exciting. Ghoulia's brain helmet, that was a nice choice because I feel like that ties nicely into the roller skating, but also it's very thematic for Ghoulia as a zombie. So like that's cool. Most of the dolls I don't outright find ugly, but I just think they're so nothing. Kind of like how I felt about Creepover, but it bothers me more because to me personally, roller skating is a much more interesting concept than a sleepover. And so for it to be boring is like, really? Like, how did you even manage that? It almost feels like it takes a little bit of talent to make it so unfun. So sorry if you like this one, but yeah, they're really boring to me. We are still hanging out with Gen 1 for right now. We're going to be talking about the classroom line. I just think these are that's kind of the best way that I can put it. It's just a disappointed noise. I don't know, like I will say, and this means something because y'all know I'm not a fan of Gen 1 Frankie. I do think that this is one of the better Frankie dolls from Gen 1. I do think that she looks really cute, especially the leggings. A lot of the time the like patterned leggings, especially we started to see this a lot with Ever After High. I'm not always a big fan, but I think that they work really, really well for this Frankie doll. So I do like her. I think that the other dolls are for the most part fine. Like they're not terrible, but they're also just so boring to me. I don't know. I don't know what it is exactly. I just don't find them appealing. I mean, 3 out of the line have just a really, really basic outfit on and then a white coat on top to be kind of like a lab coat, I guess. Which, is it thematic? Sure, but I just don't like it. I also don't love this Abby. I feel like I've said this a lot before. I prefer Abby when she has more like pastel colors. I just think it looks a lot better with her color scheme, especially for Gen 1. So I don't love the black or like the super bright hair and everything like that. I feel like her streaks look kind of awkward. This line just, I can't even only say underwhelms me because there is like a little bit of animosity there. Like, I don't like it. I don't like the line. I feel like I can't adequately pinpoint why. I just think that the concept, I mean, even the concept could have been cooler. Like, they have Abby and Heath from Home Ick. That could have been fun with like the science stuff. I feel like there is potential there. But instead, I feel like we just kind of got lame outfits with like coats on top, and it doesn't work for me. So I'm not a big fan. Coming in as sixth place, we're going to be taking a look at our first G2 line, and that is the How Do You Boo First Day of School line. Now, I do need to be like very specific with that because G2 did this thing where a lot of their lines had like subcategories, and a lot of them were like they had kind of a more detailed, more articulated line, and then there were more budget ones. Obviously, I'm not looking at the budget ones, so I am specifically talking about the First Day of School line, which was essentially like the core dolls for G2. Like, this was kind of when they started rolling them out, which maybe some of the reason it's on this list is because that is a cultural moment that I didn't love to see. I don't think, again, that everything about G2 was terrible, and some of the faces I do think really worked. Like, I don't think the G2 Laguna's face is terrible, or even Frankie or Draculaura. I don't think that Cleo looks great in G2, but maybe part of this is just because I'm remembering like the moment that Monster High switched and everything kind of changed up there a little bit. But also, I just don't think that the designs are super, super great. Not all of them are horrific, but I do think, especially when you take into consideration that like before this, we as like a fan base of Monster High had been so used to like the Gen 1 and everything with that. This just looks really lackluster in comparison. I don't think that Cleo's outfit like color coordinates well. Kind of the same thing with Ari Hauntington. I actually think I featured both of those dolls in one of my Monster High fixing videos, which is kind of funny. If I recall correctly, this Laguna also has like a one-piece outfit. Like, there's no layers, so you could already see the quality decreasing there. I will say I think Claudine's outfit is fine. I'm not 100% sold on like the hair or face. I think her outfit's okay though. So again, we're still, you know, not all the way up there. This isn't the most egregious line, but I don't actively like any of the dolls, and I do actively dislike a couple of the dolls, so I kind of feel like it had to be on here. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at another G2 line, another like subcategory of a G2 line. So from the Welcome to Monster High line, we're looking specifically at Dance the Fright Away, and this one is rough. The only redeeming factor is this Cleo. I do think that she is quite pretty. I actually do have her, although I did repaint her face because, again, not the biggest fan of G2 Cleo's face, but every other doll in this line I just genuinely think is at best, but most of them are bad. I'm thinking the Abby could be worse, even though she is like that dark color scheme that I don't tend to enjoy, but the others are just so not good. I feel like Laguna looks super awkward. She's wearing almost like a dress that I feel like I would see a teacher wear, which is great for a teacher. Like, there's a time and place for an outfit like this, but a teenager going to a dance doesn't really feel like it. Monica looks absolutely silly to me. Claudine would never wear anything like this. Like, she knows better. Deuce, poor Deuce. I mean, we know in general that boy dolls for most companies tend to get a little bit less budget than the girl dolls. So I know a lot of what we're seeing with Deuce is just he probably didn't get a ton of budget, but it's especially noticeable, and he looks so bad here with like the printed on tuxedo shirt. It's just not good. Genuinely, like, Cleo is the reason that this line wasn't ranked higher, because I do think that is such a pretty doll, but it's still really not good, so still on the list. Coming into fourth place, we're going to look at G3 again. This is the Ghoul Spirit line. So I did buy this pack when it was on clearance at Walmart. This was one of the first things that G3 came out with. So I can tell you personally, like, having seen these dolls up close, they're so rough. The base dolls are not terrible, especially the Cleo, the Draculaura, and the Toralei. Oh, and the Frankie, actually. I love their, like, side shave in this doll. They're good. The Claudine has really, really rough polypropylene. The Deuce is just, like, a Deuce, but he's got extra face paint, which I'm not really a big fan of. So the base dolls, for the most part, are okay, but the outfits are so bad. Part of this is just that I'm not a sporty person at all, so I tend to not be drawn to sports themed dolls, so like that's not helping a lot. But genuinely, the only doll out of this pack that I like want to use some of the pieces is the Frankie, because they have these really cool green boots and this cute little black and green skirt, and I feel like those two are pieces that someday I will find a way to style nicely on a Frankie doll. But the others, No, I've redressed already the Draculaura and the Cleo. They look great now, but the clothes they came with are just so rough for me personally, stylistically, but also the quality was really, really not super with this pack, which was like, I don't know, kind of bizarre to see. I'm not really sure why they chose to do that, but the fabrics feel notably worse than most other G2, notably worse than most other G3 releases. So all around, this was just not a solid one for me. I bought it because it was on clearance and because I knew I could redress the dolls. And so if you're someone who likes to redress dolls and you buy a pack like this when it's on a super sale, it is really, really nice because you get a bunch of dolls for a good price and then you have these dolls that you can put different clothes on. But if it had never gone on clearance, I wouldn't have touched this pack with a 10-foot pole. It's rough as it comes, so it definitely had to be featured here. Breaking into the top three, we're actually staying with a very, very similar theme here because I want to look at the Ghoul Spirit line from Gen 1 because this wasn't the first time with G3 that they've done a Ghoul Spirit line, and it wasn't the first time they've done one that I thought was bad. I just I just still don't like this for a lot of the same reasons. I feel like the designs are a little bit uninspired. I don't have any of these dolls personally. I've never seen them in person, so I can't really speak to the quality of the fabrics, but I can tell you I don't think that I can't talk today, apparently. I don't think the designs are cute. The Venus base doll looks fine. I guess the Spectre is okay. It looks like she does have the, like, more purpley hair that I prefer. But I don't know. Slow-mo is kind of whatever. Y'all know I don't like G1 Frankie. I already said that this video. I just don't enjoy this. And I think the reason that for me it's worse than the G3 Ghoul Spirit line is because at least with that line, first of all, you get more base dolls that I do like. Second of all, there were a couple of pieces that I felt were salvageable and could be reused to make something cute. Whereas this one, if I were to get any of these dolls, not a single piece would end up being used. So these are pretty neck and neck, which makes sense. Like, they are thematically almost exactly the same, right? But for me, I just think that this one was a little bit less exciting, so pops up a little higher. For the number 2 spot, I'm going to complain about a line that I've complained about a lot in the past, and that is Gen 1's Geek Shriek line. I just genuinely hate every single thing about this, from the designs to the concept. First of all, they're kind of boring. Like, most of them have the same silhouette. There's not a lot of exciting things going on here. I think the prints are pretty rough for almost every single piece of clothing. But what really gets me is just the concept in general. I will say that, like, I understand the whole thing of, like, geeks and smart people have glasses is, like, not the most harmful stereotype ever, but I do feel like it is a stereotype that is typically used in a negative way. Like, it's just not a nice stereotype, I guess I would say. And especially as someone who wears glasses, I'm just like, can we please get dolls that have glasses that are not supposed to have this negative connotation to them? I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, I miss G3 Claudine's glasses. I'm sad that she doesn't really come with them anymore because it was nice to see a character who's just living her life and happens to need glasses. Like, that's just something that I like to see because, again, I wear glasses. I have to wear glasses. I am so, so blind without them. And so for me personally, lines like Geek Shriek, where it's just like, hey, if you have glasses, you're a fucking nerd. Like, yes, okay, I am a nerd. I understand that, but it's when I say nerd, I mean it positively, right? Like, I think nerds are fun and interesting and quirky, and that's great. But most of the time, when media says nerd or geek, they're not talking about it in a good way. And so it really bothers me that we finally get characters like wearing these glasses and it feels like it's supposed to be a bit of a mockery. I don't know. I just really hate genuinely every single thing that Geek Shriek stands for. But somehow there's a line I dislike even more. And that line is electrified. This one hurts my soul. Again, I know I've said like a few times this video, but I just feel like I need to be very clear about it. I don't think everything G2 was terrible, but I do think that electrified for me personally was the line that kind of felt like, oh, I'm done collecting. Like, this is it for me. Because when I was like a fledgling collector, when I started collecting in a serious way, I only collected Monster High. I don't know why. I just was like very strict with myself at that point in time. I was, I don't know, an angsty, weird teen. That's all I got. But it was only Monster High. Would not collect Barbie, would not collect Ever After High, which, like, I regret now. But for me, Monster High was the reason I was collecting, and that was the only thing I was willing to collect. So when Electrified came out, the few lines before that, I remember I had felt kind of iffy about and not been like the most excited, but I still was like, oh, well, eventually they'll come out with another one that I really, really like, right? Electrified hit the shelves, and I remember so vividly seeing them and standing in the toy aisle trying to convince myself that I liked these dolls and trying to convince myself that this was okay, but knowing deep down that I didn't like these and that I probably wasn't going to like what came forward. And this line, it really just, this is a very personal one because I feel like to me it really did signify, okay, this is it for Monster High. You're done collecting now. And I did take a hiatus for a very long time, for several years until Rainbow High came out, and I didn't collect for a long time. And so while I do think that a lot of the reason Electrified makes it onto this list is the aesthetics, because I still don't think that they look great all these years later. Like, I still haven't been able to convince myself that these are pretty dolls. But most of the reason they're on this list is because for me, it really did signal an end of an era. And it was just really, really sad to see, and sad to be like, oh, I guess I'm not going to be going to Toys R Us as much because Toys R Us was still open back then. I know it's like still in Canada, but like within the US now, it's just in like little Macy's stores. But back then it was like, oh yeah, I go to Toys R Us and I look for new Monster High dolls. And so I remember thinking, okay, I guess I'm not doing that. When I go to Target, I'm not going to look at the toy aisles anymore. And it was just such a heartbreaking feeling. So yeah, Electrified has a lot of bad emotions tied up in it for me. So yeah, I kind of was always destined to be number one on this list, especially with the parameters that I put in place to prevent like a super, super bad budget line from being there. This line is just really, really not it for me. But yes, guys, those are my bottom 10 Monster High lines. I'm done being negative for the day. I always feel funny filming these videos because, like, I do the top 10 and I'm gushing and I'm excited, and then I do these and it's like a little bit more complaining and critiquey. But also, I do like to complain and critique sometimes. So they're still very fun for me. I hope that it was fun for you. Of course, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on all of the lines that I discussed today. And also, if there's one that you think I should have had on the list, but I left out, definitely feel free to let me know that as well. But I think that is all I have for y'all today. So I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.